So, good evening, everyone. Last night, Professor Tina Wong visited Grantham Hospital, and then she delivered a wonderful lecture on glaucoma management, showing some challenging surgical cases. We had a very good time. What Tina is going to do tonight is to talk with you about innovation in ophthalmology. So, how am I going to introduce Tina? Now, this is Professor Wong, Tina Wong, and let's see how this magazine is actually a pretty recent article described her. Eye expert Professor Tina Wong on her visionary pursuits. Eminent glaucoma specialist, a founder of two startups, an outspoken proponent of health tech. She tells the Peak, the magazine, how she packs it all in. And I would like actually to introduce Professor Tina Wong to introduce herself. Let's take a look.
Success is not one thing. Success can be anything in terms of whether it's emotional, personal achievements, monetary. But to me, it may not even be achieving something as an end goal. Success is just getting through the day and having a journey to get to something that you want at the end. So I think success is multifaceted. To be top of your game, I think you just have to be focused, be disciplined, believe in yourself, and also to not imbalance your life. We talk about work-life balance a lot now, and so be disciplined. When you're at work, you work hard. When you're at home, you work hard being at home, being a mum, a wife, whatever it is. You work hard. If you want to relax, you relax. Enjoy yourself, go to the spas, do things that makes you happy. So that's my motto in life, and I think that extends to, pretty much what I do. Best advice that I've ever received in my career would be from a professor, and he said that it's best to have one bird in the hand rather than two birds in the bush. And I think that sort of resonates with a lot of things that we do. We should focus on the good things and the things that we have achieved and the things that are tangible that we've got, and not always be chasing what is and wishing our lives away. We only have one life. We should just focus and do something that we can do well. I hope that with this refreshed opening for everybody in the world, that we are going to see equity finally, because it's a long time coming in and we're not quite there yet. Equity in terms of women and men, both in the workforce and also at home as well. So I think we're moving in the right direction. Still a lot of work to do, but I think with the next generation, I think we'll get there, so it's very positive. Honestly, I think people who use being a woman a crutch for a reason to not achieve things undermines everything that we have achieved that is positive. And so that's my pet peeve, because we shouldn't be doing that to our own kind. I really hope that we can be more supportive for each other. I'm Professor Tina Wong. I'm the head of the glaucoma service at the Singapore National Eye Centre.
So Tina is very nice of her coming here this evening, and she's actually the executive director of the National Health Innovation Center for more than 6 years, and she is very, very. We are honored to have her to talk with us about ophthalmic innovation. So let's get her a big applause and welcome Professor Tina Wong.
Oh, we have to swap, don't we? Well, Chris just surprised me there because I wasn't expecting that kind of introduction. Okay. So I haven't been to Hong Kong for, well, since 2018, and it really wasn't the happiest times because my grandmother had passed away and she was 106. So I hope that I can make it that far as well with all the good innovations and medicines that are coming through. But I think today it is great to come back to, to my home, I would say, and to be able to share with you about innovation, because I think with COVID, we've all really have lived through it, survived it, come out the other end, but it's also because of the compression of innovation to accelerate a vaccine, that we know that things can happen quickly. Where there's a will, there's a way. And you are all researchers, and you all have great ideas, I'm sure. And it's just a matter of really planting that seed and gradually growing it into something that becomes clinically impactful and helps mankind. And so really I want to share with you today is about innovation in, oops, is there anything? No, there's nothing coming up. In Singapore. If I do the slideshow, it doesn't come up. So excuse me one moment. It's still on. Should I just close it and see, try again? Is there some slideshow? No. Here we are. Okay. All right, thanks. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about how we can drive impactful innovation from the public health institutions from an idea into a clinically useful technology that's adopted. So let's just talk about, the tsunami, the silver tsunami. Okay, we all know that there's an increase of our aging population, and that this is just statistics taken from Singapore, which I think you can translate to any country in the world at this present time. But what was alarming to me when I was going to some of these senior meetings in terms of the projection of what money Singapore government wants to invest in, is that by 2020, there was over 15% were over the age of 65, but in just less than a decade, we're going to have 1 in 4 Singaporeans is going to be over the age of 65. Now, I don't know what it's going to be in Hong Kong, but it might be around about 1 in 4 persons will be over 65 by 2030, and that's quite scary. So what does that mean? That means that there's going to be much more burden to the healthcare services, which are probably already collapsing or on the verge of collapse because of the huge numbers of patients that we have to get through. So how does innovation help? Well, it does help, because if you think about how you can use technology to improve your patient workflow or to improve patient healthcare, you're going to be able to do much more with less burden on whatever systems are available. And so what I'm talking about is like the application of AI, okay? The application of telehealth or telemedicine, next generation sequencing for various other conditions, wearable sensors. We know about the Google glasses and things like that. 3D printing, we know that that's actually being used already to develop bespoke heart valves or even attachments for orthopedic surgeons. And point of care diagnostics. So I don't know what areas you're all involved in, perhaps some of it resonates with what your area of research or your research interests are. And how that then translates is that it becomes value-based. And then the government will say, well, you know what, this is really good, this came from Hong Kong U. It means that we can reimburse and we'll start to be able to implement it island-wide. Precision medicine is also important because then you can identify the people who are going to benefit from certain treatments without having to do huge mass screening on individuals, which wastes a lot of resources. And then we want to do more home monitoring. I think all of you probably know about home monitoring. So therefore, the patients don't have to come into hospitals for maybe some simple monitoring procedures, especially for patients who are relatively stable. They don't need to come into the hospitals. And it's difficult for elderly patients to come and wait for hours to see a doctor. And so, there are 3 areas of healthcare applications. You can see there's screening and diagnosis, there's wellness and disease prevention, and then there is direct care delivery. And from the agency which I was overseeing, the National Health Innovation Center, which is a pocket of money that the government sort of earmarks, and I'm responsible for awarding this money for innovations in Singapore. And you can see that we have developed from ideation all the way up development, translation, and clinical adoption. At every step of the way of the innovation journey or the life cycle of innovation, the NHIC, or this grant agency, there is financial support for the innovators, for the clinicians, for the researchers, for the healthcare innovators amongst you. We know that innovation doesn't wait. All right, so you have an idea, but it may be obsolete in about 3 years, 5 years, depending on what you're doing. Innovation or technology is moving very fast. And for the NHIC, I've always said we need to be fast. We can't have the PIs being involved in a lot of red tape. When they get their award, they get their money within 6 weeks max. I mean, usually the NMRC in Singapore, it can take 6 months before you can even get your money dispersed because you've got research collaborative agreements and all this other administrative red tape that needs to be passed through before you even get your money to start your grant. So it's supposed to fast track because we understand that innovation is something that is now. And if you don't give the money, it may not be useful, and therefore there'll be a waste of funds. So I'll just walk you through what we do in Singapore. And this just shows you I have a team of project managers in the agency, grant agency. And what we do is, say for example, a doctor in my hospital cluster has an idea. So what they'll do is they'll engage with one of the project managers. We have a project manager that looks after each cluster. So here in Hong Kong, you'd have a project manager, the island, one in Kowloon, one in the New Territories. And they would then go to this project manager and say, look, I got this idea, what do you think? Do you think I have a chance of applying for money? So what they'll do is they'll do a commercialization potential assessment. And this is all done for free, by the way. So this is part of the agency's support and encouragement for innovation so that people can come and get free advice. We will also look at your IP or your potential intellectual property, which is really the monetary asset of your invention, okay? And then we provide funding pathway guidance. And what I mean by that is we will recommend the appropriate funding agency depending on what stage your innovation is. It could be just a seed, it could be even an idea, you haven't even tested it out, it could be hypothetical. Or it could be something that you've already worked on and you're already about to file a technical disclosure. So depending on what stage you're at, the project manager will then proceed to give you advice. So for example, you have got your grant and now you're going to get going. So then what happens? Well, there are various stages, okay? So the first stage is how you develop your innovation. So let's talk about, a device. It's more medtech, okay? Let's talk about medtech because it's a lot easier to translate. You need to go through regulatory assessments for your medtech devices, and medtech devices are categorized depending on how invasive they are. So if it's like a walking stick, that's a device, but it's the lowest of the low of, there's no safety issues compared to sort of like a hearing aid, or it could be a device to like a tongue depressor. All these things have different layers or levels of approval as a medical device. So we will also provide advice in terms of what regulatory approvals you need in order to get your device into the market or even get tested in the clinics. If it's going to be something that's a drug, then you need to do a clinical trial. Then we will get advice from the Singapore equivalent of the FDA. I don't know what it is in Hong Kong, but there's probably something equivalent, right? In Hong Kong, you have like a FDA equivalent, no, or China equivalent FDA. You don't have anything? Okay, all right. So, okay, we'll talk about that later then. So, if you have a device, then you will need to get a prototype, right? So you need to know who you're going to get to help you with your prototype. Now, if you're a researcher, you might know a colleague who is in the engineering school, for example, who can help set something up, or they could do microfluidics or whatever. So you can go to another school in your university to help you with a potential prototype. And if you involve them, then obviously they will end up becoming a partner or a collaborator for your invention, because whatever they do with the refinements that you advise them, it will be a partnership, because the intellectual property is not just from you, it's going to be from the engineer as well, because it takes two people to come together to get something useful out. So it's okay to share, all right? People, I can talk to you about, how people are very, they don't want to share, and they try to sort of say, well, this is mine, and I'm not going to put you on. But at the end of the day, if you don't have enough people to help you, you may never get your product to see the light of day. It's easier to share, to then have huge success, rather than you have 100% protection for something that no one ever picks up. So there are a lot of lessons that can be learned, but today's lecture is not to talk about that. But I said to Prof. Low that I'll be very happy to talk a little bit more about that in the future. If you like, I can come back and give some lectures on how to navigate those relationships, because that's also very important as to how successful your innovation can get through. And IP support is important. So we have an Office of Intellectual Property in Singapore at each cluster level, and that particular department manages all the IP for that particular hospital. And so it could be from orthopedic, eye, gastro, cancer, whatever it is. They have a pot of money which is given by the government each year. It could be 3 million Singapore dollars, and they manage this money and they use it to file for different territories for all the innovations that are coming through, from the labs and where you work. We talk about commercialization, but that comes much later on. So you've got your marketing, but that's actually by that stage, you're already onto something really big. So I think we will start small first, okay? But this is just to give you broad strokes of what to expect and the pathway that you will go by. And then obviously, after commercialization, the funding agency will continue to support you in terms of your technology marketing. They will go out and help you get vendor support and raise awareness of your product. They will continue to advise you on your regulatory journey to get final seal of approval, so that people can start using your devices, and then you start getting feedback from how it works, and then you can do like a version 2.0 and then version 3.0, etc., etc. And then the other final part, which is very important, is to enable strategic partnership. So you probably don't know who is going to really want to buy your product, your asset, but the project managers will do a due diligence to see where this technology fits into the commercial market. And they'll look at who the major players are. They could be Siemens, Samsung, Panasonic, Johnson & Johnson, whatever it is. They will have access to all these industry partners, and they will pitch to say, look, you know, this is something that is coming from, you know, Hong Kong U. And they'll say, the industry might say, okay, I'm quite interested, and then they'll connect you. So we even do that for all our innovators for free, because it comes from the government. So this is just some examples. I'll just quickly share with you some of the licensed technologies that the NHIC, the grant agency, has funded. So the first one on the left is a surgical device. It was actually created by a surgeon, because his story is that when he did gastric surgery, the light pipe was never bright enough for him to really go into the nooks and crannies because of the bowel. There are lots of crevices and so forth. So he came up with a self sort of retaining surgical lighting solution. And based on that, it's been licensed to a company called Vivo Surgical, and it's now taken off and it's now being used in Southeast Asia. So this has been funded by not just the hospital, by NHIC, but also from the Ministry of Health. And they've recognized that, you know, these sort of ideas that come from the clinics are usually the ones that are most valuable, because you see what is the unmet need in the clinics, or, you know, in the working environment in the hospitals. So innovations that come from people who are close to healthcare, it makes sense because you know where the gaps are. The second one is a training simulator. Now this was actually quite interesting. This came from not a doctor, but it was from an allied healthcare. I think it was like an A&E technician. And it is to train people how to look after patients who come in with cardiac arrest and everything. So it was a model. But you know, this came from a hospital, but it came from a casualty technician, right? The next one is an implant, which is from a doctor, and it's a device that you put into the stomach, and it sort of helps to churn the gastric juices in vulnerable individuals. So all these have been further licensed to other companies. If we talk about startups, we have three examples. The first one is AI. We talked about AI, and AI in ophthalmology is very big, okay, because it's easy to do screening of the retina for various diseases. And this is actually, this technology is to screen for patients with diabetic retinopathy. And it was an innovation from the previous medical director in the National Eye Center where I work. So that one is now being used around the region and outside of Asia now. We have people in Europe, some hospitals in Europe and the US also using this to screen for DR in the community. The second one is this is my favorite, the rehabilitation device. You see this lady, she's got her leg through, looks like a tumble dryer. But it's not. It's a rehabilitation device. So it's for people who've had injuries, sports injuries, or have had orthopedic surgery, and you know their legs become a bit wasted and they have to come back to see the physio on a regular basis, right, for 4 to 6 weeks. And it's quite strenuous and traumatic for patients, especially if they're elderly. Well, this will do it for you in your own home. So what you do is you can actually get this machine, and whichever body part you need to rehabilitate, you just stick your limb in, and then it will do some fancy work, which obviously is proprietary intellectual property, but it helps to stimulate the muscles without you having to do it yourself. And they've also got a virtual sort of connection with the physio as well, so that they can, the patient at home can then communicate with the physio in the hospital. And this is loaned to certain patients, and this has been now opened up to different hospitals, and also even in community hospitals where patients can just go and have 1 hour sessions, and they can book the sessions. It's close to where they live, rather than having to go into like trips all the way down to a hospital and wait to go see the physio. They can just go at the comfort of like 10 minutes down the road, they've got the community hospital, those machines are there. So the government's actually supported this significantly in terms of putting them in around satellite hospitals which are closer to patients for their convenience. The third one is a therapeutic, and this is what I mentioned to Prof. Leung last night. Therapeutics, it's very difficult to do startups. I mean, well, my two startups are therapeutics, and so that's a different story. I like challenges, I suppose. So this one is from a colleague of mine who is a cardiologist. He's a clinician scientist, and his area of interest is fibrosis, but in the heart and lung fibrosis. So he did a significant amount of work collecting samples in the heart and did whole genome sequencing to look for particular hits. What they found was interleukin-6 was featured and highlighted very significantly in these patients' diseased hearts and diseased tissues. So he then proceeded for the next 5 years to look at whether this could be validated and could be confirmed. And he used several animal models. Then he proceeded to say, okay, works for the heart and the lung. He says, what about the liver? And how about the kidney? And how about the skin? So every single one of those where he found it worked, he found a pattern. So then you have a big patent family, okay? So you have your target molecule, you have your broad indication, which is fibrosis, and then you drill down which ones it's significantly relevant to, okay? So he had a huge family, he had other indications, and he then started developing antibodies. So then he had another patent family of antibodies, which were specifically targeting interleukin-6. It came to a point where he decided to then license all his IP into a startup company, which he spun out, which is called Enleofen. So all the IP which Sing Health, the cluster, owned, they then moved it into his startup company, and then based on that, he came to me and asked advice about startups, and I then ended up becoming one of his advisors in his startup company. And it was at the time where there was a lot of interest in the cardiology space to look for antifibrotic. He then was very successful in licensing the whole IP family to a very big pharmaceutical company. And I will probably disclose, I'll share with you how much the upfront was 250 million US cash, which then was split by all the inventors and the hospital and the university. But the majority, around 60%, went to the inventors, and then it was split down. So it was a very happy day for him. But the whole deal was 650 million, and it was going to be done on tranches, because when the companies take your molecule, they have to develop it. So every time they get a milestone, you can then give dividends to the original inventors, and that makes a lot of money. But it's like having a whale, right? Therapeutics are extremely difficult to be successful in. The journey from an innovation or an idea all the way to a product or a drug takes 20 to 25 years. So this interleukin-6 antibody may take another 15, 20 years before it comes on the market. However, along the way, the inventors, and I'm also a shareholder, I can disclose that I do get dividends from this company, this startup. So everyone benefits, all right? But he has a huge team. He had about 20 people helping him get this successful. He had the idea, and obviously he has the major share, but you spread the wealth, because if you don't get all your right collaborators together, you're never going to get successful. So he has collaborators who work in the kidney, in the skin, in the eye, which is me, in the heart, in the lung, and all these people are named as inventors as well. So the thing is that if you are going to want to be successful, you have to be smart at it as well, all right? But you also have to choose people very carefully. Okay, so let's talk about SERI, which is the Singapore Eye Research Institute. And SERI has been the leader or the trailblazer in terms of innovation in Singapore. We have done this for over 10, 15 years now. And we've been very, very successful. in terms of commercialization of various different types of innovations. You just saw the Selena, which was the AI. And its role is to do the technical transfer, also industrial collaborations, which I just mentioned, but also to help with resource and education for the SERI PI so that they know what to expect. Because innovation is very important. You need to educate your inventors. So this is actually the current, as of last year in October. I'm okay to share this with you, but you can see all the technologies from just Singapore Eye Research Institute. Every bubble represents a patented idea. And you can see it's therapeutics, devices, diagnostics, software, and the stage of development, and the different areas that we have got innovations. And it spans from cornea, cataract, glaucoma, myopia, and so on. And you can see the different stages from the concept all the way to prototype, and then down towards industry and human trials. And this is a very busy slide. It's a live slide because things move from one to the other. But you can see that our technology development department is extremely busy because they have to manage everything. So I'm the chairperson for this technology department, and we recently had an incubator advisory board meeting where we shared and updated the external advisors on all our inventions and innovations. So you can see there's a lot of activity in Singapore in the eye. And you can see that from the technologies, we've got some commercial success in terms of startups. All right, we have some startup companies, but we also have licensed technologies. All right, and I'll share a little bit more on that later. We also attract multinational companies and small to medium-sized enterprises as well. And you can see the list of all our partners for some of the innovations that are being developed. And the technology development team are critical, bringing these partners in and sharing the executive slide deck to show and to garner interest from the various industry partners. And that is the key, all right? The secret sauce is not just you, but you've got to get a team to be able to support you, because you need that support in order to be successful, to reach out to the right people. We also have an incubator. So an incubator is really where you've got funding from the government. Say, for example, you've got 50,000 Hong Kong dollars and you've got a prototype, but then that's it. There's no more money. And you go, okay, well, I need more money to take it to the next level. It's really promising. My boss says it's really good. And my collaborator, he's definitely, says this is going to be exciting technology. What do? Because if you don't get any more funding because there's nothing available, then it's just going to die, right? Because you need to keep going. And but it's not ready to go into industry yet because it's too early stage. Industry will say, you know what, it's a nice idea, but come back in 5 years, sort of thing, So there's a gap, and we call it the valley of death, right? And so this valley of death is really sort of bridged by something called an incubator, where you incubate the ideas until it's ready and mature enough to go out into the big bad private investment world, okay? And you can see we've got 3 phases. So you've got the pre-incubation. That area is to check on, patentability, check your market value assessment, commercial potential, which is very important, and also look at the regulatory assessment, because that will tell you how long it's going to take for your product to get to the right level. Then you go into the incubation period, which is what I was talking about. And there are various different tranches depending on how mature your innovation is. So it could be just seed funding of 50,000, all the way to final, which is 750, which could be final sort of refinement of your prototype that you need, or the final prototype needs to be tested on 3 monkeys before you can get it to the next stage. But monkey experiments are very expensive, and so where are you going to get the money? So the incubator will be able to bridge that gap, because for example, this is exactly what happened, is that one of the big pharmaceutical companies was interested with a colleague of mine, a professor in Ophthalmology. He's come up with a really good idea, but they said, we need you to test on non-human primates. He had tested it, I think, on guinea pigs and rabbits, and I think even rodents, mice, but they wanted a fourth one, which was NHPs. And he just didn't have any money, so the incubator supported him to do that final round of experiments before the term sheet could even be considered to be ready to be evaluated and negotiated. So, the incubator concept is important to bridge those gaps at that moment in need. So it's like getting a loan, right? It's a desperate sort of stage where no one's going to take you, but it's very, very promising. And so that's where the incubator comes in. And then after you've got your money, you either then license out or you then spin out. So this is just a journey. This is just how the SERI TD&C do support innovation all the way to commercial rollout. And it's critical every step of the way, and you work hand in hand with the team very closely. So this is really what they share is that they have to identify, you guys have to identify the solution, okay, whatever it is, your product and what your business is. And then the technology team will then, the commercialization team will then help you with your technology development, because there are a lot of things that you may not realize that comes with ideation, and that's where their role is. You're not expected to know everything about it, but they're there to provide that support. And then eventually you can then release it into the clinics. So they're not always successes, all right? There have been failures as well. So the other thing is that don't be afraid to fail. Your first idea, you will feel very, it's like your baby, and you become very protective of it and very emotional, and you say, no, this is the best thing, this is the best thing. I've sat in so many pictures, I tell you, when they're blind to the fact that it's never going to work, because they just don't see it, and they're too proud of their idea, and they are not willing to let go. When you have an idea, you have to have an open mind, right? You must read as much as possible in that space. You must know who your competitors are. And when you get feedback to say that it's not going to work because of these reasons, or you come all the way here but you can't file anymore because the examiner from the US says, it's not novel enough, you have to let go and say, okay, that didn't work, let's go back and think of something else. All right, that's the attitude you've got to have. You don't go, get really angry and start getting, everyone's against me, and and people just get very upset and emotional. That's not the way to be, all right? Because in Silicon Valley, they have a saying is that if you've never failed, you won't be successful, because it's only through the failures do you really learn and become better, right? And no one is invincible, right? So don't think you know it all, because you don't know it all. Be humble, be modest. Always ask questions, always want to learn, always be eager to hear what other people have to say, because it might just be what you need to hear in order to get your product to the next level, right? So I always say, don't worry if this first project doesn't work, it's died its death. Like some of my colleagues say, no, my project's just died, and then we joke about it. So, okay, what are you doing now? I says, well, I've got this other idea. And that's the right attitude, right? You've got to be positive about it and learn from it and say, okay, I learned. Some of my colleagues have had very bad experiences with nasty collaborators, okay? And they've been burnt, and they don't trust people. They say, well, I don't want to work with anyone because I don't trust, because this person ran away with my idea and did it with somebody else. But you have to learn from it. So relationships are very important. It's also often quite good if you know people. So you can ask someone like, I can ask Prof. Long, I've got something. Do you know someone in Hong Kong who can do this for me? And then he'll say, yeah, this guy's really good, and I've worked with him. So knowing people as recommendations are also very good. Don't sort of cold call, because you need to know people's track records as well. Okay. So let's just now finally go to some examples of commercialization success. So myopine is an eye drop that is for treating young children with myopia. And it's now been licensed in a lot of regions, as you can see, and it came from SNEC. So this is it's a huge success, and since then, you know, they're now moving over to the West as well, because now, you know, people in the West are recognizing that myopia is not just a major problem in the East, from Asia, in Asia, but also because of people looking at tablets. The young people looking at tablets all the time in the West are also developing significant amounts of myopia at a very early stage. And then the final one is corneal transplant. Now, Professor Donald Tan and Jod Mehta is now the executive director of the Singapore Eye Research Institute. He's my buddy. And then Donald Tan was the previous medical director back in 2000. And I'm just going to share with you this innovation because it won a prize in the American Academy of Ophthalmology. So I'd like somebody to come and I'm going to show you a video. All right, just a little bit of entertainment at the end of the talk. So,
You're gonna show the casino video?
yes, you know it. We've got the volume. There's no volume? There's no sound? Is there sound? Can you hear it?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
In the form of descemet stripping, automated endothelial keratoplasty, or DSEK for short, is fast becoming the preferred alternative to conventional penetrating keratoplasty. But the major challenge is to reduce endothelial damage, largely induced by folding and unfolding the donor lamella in the AC, which can be surgically challenging. Recent studies reported high primary graft failure rates ranging from 6 to 45% and approximately 34% endothelial cell loss after surgery. As a result, surgeons are seeking alternative methods to implant the donor. We have developed a simple and effective technique using a modified anterior chamber IOL sheath glide, enabling insertion of the donor without folding into an anterior chamber deepened with an AC maintainer. This technique is ideal even in small eyes with high vitreous pressure, as the glide prevents iris prolapse when the wound is opened. The donor is pulled through with the use of a tan DSEK forceps, which is also being developed. In this animation, the sheath glide is first trimmed slightly to slide through a 5mm scleral incision into the AC. Viscoelastic is used both on the glide and on the donor endothelial surface, and the donor is placed onto the glide. The tan DSEK forceps is then inserted across the AC, emerging out through the wound to grasp the donor, which is then simply pulled in a slightly upwards direction into the eye. The glide is then removed, and injection of a small air bubble prevents descent of the donor this video of our technique, a modified sheets glide is first inserted through a 5mm scleral tunnel. Copious amounts of viscoat is then placed on the endothelial surface of the donor, and the anterior lamella is then removed. More viscoat is placed onto the glide, and the donor is then carefully everted endothelial surface down onto the bed of viscoelastic. The tan forceps is then inserted across the anterior chamber, and the donor is grabbed and simply probed into the eye. A small air bubble is inserted to keep the donor up, and after wound closure, a full air fill for 8 minutes ensures donor adherence. We have now performed 70 cases of DSEC in Asian eyes for various forms of endothelial decompensation. We initially started with the conventional tackle folding technique in our first 20 cases, but quickly abandoned this when we experienced 5 cases of primary graft failure, an unacceptably high rate of 25%. When we switched to our new glide technique for the subsequent 50 cases, we immediately noticed a significant improvement in corneal clarity in the early postoperative appearance. Our corneas in the folding cases were routinely edematous on the first day, while our glide cases were almost always clear from day one. To date, we have only experienced 1 primary failure among our 50 glide cases, representing a much lower primary failure rate of only 2%, much closer to the primary graft failure rate of 1.7% for penetrating keratoplasty at our center. In addition, our 1 failure was our first attempt at the glide technique, in which we inserted an overly thick 400-micron donor, which resulted in decimus detachment. This patient had the original folding technique for his right eye, which shows a post-operative endothelial cell loss of 47%, with a residual cell count of 1,400 cells. In contrast, the subsequent eye, which had glide insertion, only shows a 19% endothelial cell loss, and with a cell count of 2,200. We have encountered no cases of donor dislocation in our glide series, despite the use of copious viscoelastic, although we initially did have 1 case of dislocation in our folding series. All of our primary failures have also now had successful graft replacement using the glide technique. Finally, our preliminary post-operative endothelial cell count data suggests a high 63% cell loss in the folding cases, as compared to a 26% cell loss in our glide cases, a reduction by almost 60%, suggesting that the glide technique in our smaller Asian eyes is able to certainly match the reported 34% cell loss rates in larger Caucasian eyes. In summary, folding insertion in DSEC surgery appears to be more damaging to donor endothelium than our glide technique. And now that we no longer fold the donor, we are experiencing much lower rates of primary graft failure and better endothelial cell counts. So, please don't fold.
Don't fold.
Stawiamy doraz most. Projekt na $10 milionów.
I fold.
Yeah, it's very innovative. We filmed that in Donald Tan's garage one afternoon. It was quite hot. All right, so I think that's what I wanted to end with, to say that, you know, you can have successful innovations And it's really something that I really think that Hong Kong, I say this to Prof. Leung, that you know, Singapore is small compared to Hong Kong. You guys have got, I'm sure you are sitting on a gold mine of ideas. It's just a matter of how you tap it. But it's not just that. I think we had a discussion about senior management, and the leaders also have to be convinced that this is something that is worth supporting. And I really do believe it's worth supporting, because innovation is really going to be the next era for us. And so if you can do it in Hong Kong for all the people here, it will be good. It will make you know, life easier for everybody. And we don't know what the next disaster is going to be, but now we know that we can do a lot of things with AI, digitization, techniques, mRNA, nanomedicine. People are able to do this for technologies like for cars, or you know, all the devices that we have. So why are we not extending it into medicine? So that's where all of you here sitting, hopefully, have got ideas, and it would be really good to be able to see some of you come out with some innovations in the future, and I can hear about it as well. So thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Tina. It's mind-provoking lecture, and I believe everyone here in the audience agree that Singapore, Professor Wong has done a lot in pushing this forward. And I would really like to cultivate these ideas with you. Tina shared with me last night that even a radiographer actually come to her and pitch the idea that there is an invention that a radiographer devised to tag the shoot again, that, you know, because their patients always giving the scans away and the scans went missing, and this radiographer came up with the idea to develop a device that can tag into this scan to trace this, this scans, and to make sure that there's the property will be there. And I think this is a good opportunity for us now, because the government is encouraging, also supporting innovations in Hong Kong, and there are a lot that we can do together. In Hong Kong, we don't have the FDA counterparts. In China, we have a state's FDA, now called the National Medical Products Administration. Basically, they oversee pharmaceutical products and medical devices. In Hong Kong, we don't have that, so whenever we have something new, we have to go through basically two outside Hong Kong independent regulatory agencies. We have to say, for example, if we have a new drug that we want to use it to Hong Kong, then we need, say for example, FDA approval and CE mark. As long as this drug got these two regulatory agencies approval, then we can use it in Hong Kong. So it's a bit challenging, and it's also the idea that we don't have it here probably is related to the fact that the market size in Hong Kong is relatively small. Now, I would like to learn from you in Singapore, when when inventors want to protect their IP, where do they file the patents? The US, the EU, Singapore. Singapore, you mentioned that you have your own regulatory agency. In terms of the commercialization strategies, in terms of the protection of IP, what would this invention ultimately go into? Say, for example, the idea of protecting IP is that you would like to protect others from using it to make money of it. And then in Singapore, as you mentioned, is also pretty small. So how would an inventor, if say they develop a new device, you show with such a lot of new inventions there. So how to advance these products forward so that the goal here is to be used in Singapore, in Southeast Asia, But if you say that the goal here is to the markets outside Asia, then you have to go through a more complicated pathway, the FDA, the CMA. How would the Singapore government help with that?
Yeah, I think, okay, so I think there are two types of innovations. Those that will benefit Hong Kong only, okay, and they are still successful, all right, because every country has their own medical system, insurance policies, which you cannot translate to other countries, all right, like reimbursement models and things like that. That's what I'm talking about. So there may be certain devices or ideas that you've got which will only be successful in Hong Kong. Now, that's a huge market in itself. It's still a success. So that's where the innovation assessment comes in, because when you come up with an idea, then they will say, well, they'll scope out the market, both in here and outside, and they'll say, well, actually, the best place for this is in Hong Kong only. And so they'll say, well, you should just file Hong Kong, right? Or they might say, it's an Asian technology, so you should file China, Hong Kong, China and Hong Kong with, Philippines, Singapore, whatever, right? Or they might say it's a worldwide asset, and they'll say, well, Hong Kong is a very small market, but we should definitely file in China and US, for example. So it really depends on your technology, because when you do the filing, each territory can cost tens of thousands of dollars. Okay, so Europe is slightly different. Europe, if you file Europe, it usually is with the major ones, which is Germany, France, Spain, Switzerland. But the other ones sort of don't come along because the markets are really small anyway. So when you talk about Europe, you're talking about the major European countries, and UK is separate now. Okay, so if you want to file in the UK, you have to file UK, your IP there. And once you submit a filing, the first point of call is that, say for example, your technology is halfway there and you want to file the world, okay? Say for example, it's going to benefit everybody. So Australia, Europe, and America, as well as Asia. Then you've got 1 year to refine your invention. So from the time, say for example today, the 15th of March, you file this invention, you claim the X, Y, and Z. 15th of March next year, it will freeze your invention's prototype. So when you file it, it's giving you a chance to optimize as much as possible without anyone being able to touch it. So it's sort of giving you a chance to have an early date of filing, because sometimes if you don't do an early date and you carry on doing your optimization and you file later, if someone has a similar idea halfway around the world and they filed before you did, when you come to filing, when they do a search, they'll say, actually, I'm sorry, Dr. Lam, someone in the US already filed this 6 months ago. And you go, oh, okay. And then that's it, you can't file it, because otherwise you will be infringing on this original claim, because it's similar to what somebody else is doing. So it's actually a fine, it's actually, you have to make a judgment call when to file. Don't file too soon, but you don't want to file too late, because don't forget, you're not the only one in the world. There are billions of people, right, on this earth, and there could be someone else doing something very similar and can have a claim which covers what you want to do. Okay? So the problem is that the timing has to be right. So it has to be where you've got your technology scoped out to almost there, say 50%, 60%, and you say, okay, it's in quite good shape now. Okay, I'm ready. So you go in, and then the office says, okay, yeah, it looks like nobody else is doing anything similar to you, your claims are clear, we'll put a provisional filing, it's called a provisional. So when the provisional goes in, you don't actually need to say which territory is confirmed yet, because it's a provisional. It gives you 1 year to then refine your device or your drugs, or to get more data, and then to sort of refine your claims or add to your claims. And then the 1 year anniversary, they will say, okay, time's up now. Can you confirm that this is what you want to go out into the public domain? Because then it's set in stone. All right, and then that's when you have to commit to the territories that you want. And then the patent office should, the technology commercialization department should then be able to give you some guidance do a market research analysis, because those things are really important, because you need to know which areas are going to be promising and worth spending money on. They also will scope out to see which industry partners are working in, because what Professor Leung was just mentioning is about how you're going to navigate regulatory. Well, usually what happens is that if you've got a device, if you get someone like Carl Zeiss or Topcon interested, and you've got a patent, you want to license it to them, they will take it and they will do the licensing or the regulatory in those particular territories for you. But that comes at a negotiation as well, right? From how much they give you in terms of your licensing fees, because you're expecting them to come out of pocket to do all this for you, but then you don't have to do it. So what you get from them as a licensing fee might be a little bit lesser. But I think I would take that, because there's a lot of stress and blood, sweat, and hard work. So there are various things that you need to do, but you can't do it alone. You need a whole sort of ecosystem to support, and you can see that the NHIC, we support people even from the preconception, even from the ideation. And in Sing Health, I sit on a committee which is called the Innovation Clinic. We hold an innovation clinic, it's once a quarter, and anybody in the hospital, it could be a nurse, it could be a pharmacist, it could be a doctor, it could be a medical student, it could be a clinician scientist, it could be anybody that works on the campus. If they have an idea, they come in and then they just pitch to us. It's not a very sophisticated pitch because they have no experience, but it's a safe space for them to come in and to bounce ideas off professionals, to give them guidance. So I'm one of the ones, and I have another colleague who is also an innovator. He's in neurology. So he and I are the main people. But then, for example, I don't know everything about radiology or pharmacology or whatever. So if we see that there's somebody coming in a specific domain, we call in domain experts as well. So if we have something that is from cardiology, we might call in a cardiology clinician scientist to say, hey, look, you sit in and listen to this, because I haven't got a clue if this is an unmet need or not, right? Because they all say, yeah, these are all unmet needs. Everyone comes in to say it's going to save the world. Never happens, right? So we need to have some sort of reality check here. So we need to get those sort of domain experts to come in to give us sort of a bit of guidance, all right? Ophthalmology is okay, because I can do the whole of ophthalmology, and urology, my colleague can do. But for other domain experts, we do call them in. So the innovation clinics are really just free advice that we give, and it came from the idea from the NHIC that we do for potential people going for grants as well. So I think maybe that could be something you can start, but then you need a little bit more expertise to provide guidance. But I think you've got to start somewhere. Can I have a show of hands, anybody who has an idea or would think that this is something that you would be interested in doing? I mean, you don't even have to have an idea, but do you think this journey, is something that you really want, you think you can, you want to experience? Or you all just want to just do research? You want to, yeah. Put your hand up. I mean, why not try? Because, you never know. Yeah, I think it's at least half the audience, Chris.
Yes, of
Got
course.
budding innovators here. Yeah.
If we want to develop a pharmaceutical product that can be sold for $200 million US, right?
It's very attractive, isn't it? But even with the Tan Endoglide, they still get royalties. So even a simple device like Professor Tan's Endoglide, still they get little checks. Ooh, a nice little love letter coming through. It's oh, that's nice, I like this, extra bonus. I can go on a nice holiday. But it doesn't have to be huge. It could be small, but it makes a difference, and you will receive rewards for a long time to come if it's something that just comes out of an idea. I mean, something as simple as just a tiny device. So whatever it is, start talking. Okay, the only thing I have to tell you all, if you're all budding innovators, I don't know if you've seen the film Fight Club with Brad Pitt. Anyone seen, right? So you know what I'm going to say next. You don't talk about it, right? You don't talk about Fight Club. So if you have an idea, you don't talk about it in public, because you don't know who's standing behind you in Starbucks, right? It could be the Elon Musk or someone, you know, or someone who works for Google. You don't know, because that's the thing, is that if you say something that is not protected, it's then considered not novel anymore, and it's in the public domain. If it's in the public domain, it's not patentable, end of. And this is actually quite important, because all of you do research, and all of you write papers, and all of you go to conferences and present all your fantastic data, right? You go to conferences and you do this. If you think that your idea or your data may well become something that you are going to innovate with, be sure to check with the patent office or your boss to see whether it needs to be protected first. Because if you stand up and talk about this new antibody to thousands of people who will click, 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 take pictures, they'll go back to their country and they'll start developing an antibody similar to yours and file it. And you'll say, and then you'll read about it 5 years later and say, well, I came up with the idea first. It's too late. You know, you've already lost. So if you have something that you might think it's valuable, please do not publish it yet. Please do not present any of it yet until you get it checked first. Even just do a basic market research to think that, you know, there's potential. But that's what we have trained all our doctors in Singapore now. They all know. They all pass through the SERI TD&C to get evaluation and assessment first. And the provisionals don't cost much. You know, it's when you do a full PCT after your 1 year that it starts getting expensive, because you have to claim it in different territories, right? So doing a provisional is okay. Provisionals are easy peasy, okay? So provisional will just protect it. So if after a year you think, you know what, meh, it's not really working out, I'm not going to pursue this. So when it comes to that 1 year, you'll say, no, I'm not going to file, I'm just going to drop it. So you just drop it. But at least you protected yourself. All right, for the time that you feel that it may be something valuable. So that's actually very, very important. I've got to mention that about innovation, is to not talk about it willy-nilly to random people, okay? You might be looking at the person next to you, say, can I trust this person? You know, is this person going to like say it to somebody else? So be careful who you talk to about ideas. And that's really, really critical, all right? Yeah, so that's the only thing that you have to be very, very careful. I have seen, there is a story of one particular innovator who talked about his idea at ARVO, and then somebody in the US actually filed it, and it's now a drug. But this person, it was his idea, so it's very sad. You know, it does happen. So do be careful.
Thanks for these important tips. And any question from the audience?
Can I ask
Yes.
one? Just on the question, then does SERI sort of act as like a fund where it takes equity within the companies, or how does that sort of work?
Yeah, thanks. No, they don't actually. What happens is that, for example, if you have an invention that gets licensed, for example, okay, and you and maybe somebody else are the two inventors, so you share the patent 50-50. So your efforts are 50, because you have to agree on how much contribution an individual has. So if you both equally contribute, then it should be split 50-50. So let's just, for argument's sake, two people, 50% each. If you license it for $1 million, okay, it goes to the patent office, which is in Sing Health, which is the cluster patent office that runs for all the different centers, eye center, heart center, and everything, right? So they will take, I think, 10%, all right? Because that covers all the patent costs for you, right? They don't really make a profit. They're just recouping what they gave you, right? So obviously they don't expect everything to get money back, but that's their justification. So they take about 10%, I think. So then 90% goes to the host institution. So for example, for me, it would go to SERI, which is the Singapore Eye Research Institute. All right? If it was for my colleague and Leofen, it would go to the Heart Center. Okay? So the 90% would go to whichever institute you belong to. Okay? So then the 90%, that institute will then take, I think, another 10 to 15%. Okay? And that will then be 75% left, right? that 75% goes to you and you split it with your friend. Well, not your friend, but it will be your friend now. But so it depends on each institution can decide how much they want to give the inventors. But when innovation was very nascent, it was very early stage, they would have ridiculous terms where they would say their patent office would take 40%, the institution would take 40% and 20% to the inventors. And obviously no one wanted to do it because there's no incentive, right? You bust your guts and you do everything and you only get peanuts back. So they quickly changed that because they realized that there was no one doing any innovation anymore. They couldn't be bothered. So they changed it so that it now encourages, and the change of practice, it's sort of the behavioral change now, is that everyone is filing. Left where you can see, this is just in the Eye Research Institute. So then once you've got that, then you can then split, then the royalties go directly to you, 75% of it. So split with you and whoever is also listed, but then there's a percentage breakdown as well, which is agreed, pre-agreed in a research collaborative agreement. Okay, so whenever you're doing a collaboration, with another department, you then say, if you own the grant, then they may say, well, we're going to contribute 50% to help you. Yeah.
At Hong Kong U, basically the university will first decide whether the patent is viable. If the university would like to take it, then the university will support the filing fees, and then 1/3 will go to the university. Whatever revenue is generated from the patent, 1/3 will go to the faculty department, and then 1/3 will go to you. So that's the pocket money. CHK is a little bit different. CHK gives the inventors the option whether they want to pursue it by themselves, meaning that they have to pay out of their own pockets for the filing fees. If that's the case, the inventor will get 75%, and then 25% will get to the university. So this is different university have different practices, and I think here the idea, I believe Hong Kong U is considering changing it because 1/3 to the inventor is a bit too small.
I think so. I think at least you've got to give 60% back. 60 to 70% should be right because you're all working hard on something, and it's a reward. And even though you get the royalties, it's a long journey before it gets adopted or commercialized anyway. So if you really value innovation from the people who are working in the campus or the institution, you should reward them justly. So I think that's where Singapore now has changed, and a lot of people are, very comfortable. Like I said, radiology radiographer technician and nurses. Nurses are coming with all these like cute little sensors to tell them if they can, like, bleeding spots are getting worse and they need to change a wound or something. All sorts of funny little ideas are coming through. But it's maybe specific only to a hospital or to to the region or to the island itself. But it's still innovation that is supported. So they don't all have to change the world. Okay, you can always look at just here in Hong Kong first. And then once you get successful and brave, or you've got some better ideas, you can, go out and do bigger things as well.
Yes, please.
Professor Wong, so I'm actually facing a similar situation right now, but however, my host is not Hong Kong U. With projects with, say, Hospital Authority, and they kind of take a lot of the share, say like more than 50%. So me as an innovator, if the terms are unfavorable to me, do I have any say, or how can I protect myself with regard to the IP application?
So who's the other side?
Hospital authority, like the government, yeah. A lot of clip data we do is under the umbrella.
Short answer is, unfortunately, you don't have any say.
Yes, because I thought if it's industry, you would have a say, but if it's Hong Kong government, you don't have a say. That's why, Chris has to work hard, Prof. Leung has to work hard to change the thought process in the leaders. Because it's only if you get support from the government that it cascades down. So the government gives money to hospitals now. I was telling you about this model about innovation. So for example, if you want to have a technology that's adopted in the country, I have this saying that innovation without borders. So if it benefits somebody in Hong Kong Island, it should benefit someone in Kowloon and also in the New Territories, right? So why is it that the other hospitals are not adopting your technology? And it's because of competition and sometimes jealousy and things like that, right? Or they just don't want to because it's not homegrown from Kowloon side, we're not taking it, you're my rival. And these crazy, silly things do happen. So the government, I came up with the idea because I spoke to the Ministry of Health, because being at the ED, I have quite a lot of say on sort of carving out the processes and things. So I said, all right, in order to, so you have like 3 or 4 clusters, but they're not willing to share. How are you going to make them share? Okay, so this is what we came up with. So the government, we said, okay, if it's going to be a hospital technology, the Ministry of Health has money. You carve out, say, 50 million Singapore dollars. That money is given to the hospitals, but they can only tap into it if an innovation, say from Hong Kong, say Angie, you have an innovation, but you can only get that extra money if you can get your colleagues over in Kowloon to also be part of using your technology. So if you can do that, then you all get the $1 million. So it's to encourage collaboration. So if you can't get another cluster to use your device or to test your device, you don't get support from the government. So it's sort of like trying to encourage people to collaborate together. And the hospitals, the chief executives of all the hospitals, are all like scared of not being seen to cooperate. So they're all coming together and says, yeah, we'll work with you, and you share with mine and I'll share yours, and things like that. So now we've got a lot of collaboration, and it's just a change of behavior. Just simply by saying that in order to tap into this $50 million, that one of the criteria is that you have to have 2 out of the 3 clusters have to implement and then test bed this technology.
Right. The issue raised by Angie probably would need to be engineered at a higher level, because when you sign the contract in the institution, you're bound by their regulations, which you couldn't change. So this is the problem we're facing. One way you can get around, which we did before, was when we found things that are really has a high potential to generate revenue, has a high value for commercialization. Basically, what we did in the past is actually we opened up a company, and then we can file a patent from the company, not from the university. Now, obviously, but you have to be careful, because on one hand, you have to declare the conflict of interest, and second, you have also to delineate what parts of the work is done in the university and what parts is done in the company. So that get things a little bit complicated. But once you sign a contract, you're just bounded by all these rules and regulations that the university claims that they provide you the environment, they provide you the supports, so they own the IP. So this is the kind of, I think a lot of universities in Asia have this type of setting in their IP or in the innovation kind of design, that they would like to own their employees' developments or inventions. But say, for example, we have also university like Waterloo in Canada. They assignee or the owners is not Waterloo. They put the assignee back to the inventors. That really is the way to push innovation outwards. And as you can see, Waterloo University is very successful in filing patents, in getting licenses, and things like that. So there are a lot of things that need to be changed at the management level.
Yeah, I think it has to start from the top. And if they can see the benefits, it doesn't just benefit the universities, because if you have inventions and innovations, more industry will come in. They'll say, big companies are always looking for places to park their money. Okay, so if they see that Hong Kong U has got a bunch of really brilliant inventors, they're coming out with all these really good ideas, they want to know more. So what we do in Singapore is that the companies will come sit, and then you present everything you've got, like a whole suite, and it's like a la carte, they pick this or pick that, and they like this. But you've got to get to that stage first, right? They're not just going to come to you. They will come only because you've got a track record, or you've shown that you're a vibrant community that is supporting innovation from the ground, and the people are protected and looked after as well.
Thank you very much, Professor Wong. Any final question? Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Wong. So I'm a global medical student. I have a question. You said that we should all be secretive about our technology, and sometimes when we file a patent for IP, someone may have left recently. So is there a way to know someone in the industry is developing the same?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I don't know if you heard, but I mentioned about not telling people what you're doing, but how are you going to find out? You can just go onto Google and go US patent. You go there, you then type in the subject matter, and it comes down the list. It's like going onto PubMed. So you can then see what is out in the public domain already. So that just gives you a really rough idea. Okay, so that's usually what people do. That's what I do when it comes to these innovation clinics. I just quickly go online to just take a look roughly if there's anything that's out there. And you can do that yourself.
And if there's really someone has already done the technology, would you continue with the project?
Okay, if someone's already doing what you want to do, it depends. But you need to see what the scope is. All right, you might have to sidestep and do something slightly different, because you'll end up having to abandon it, especially if that person's already done a filing before you have. It's a time thing. It's a time thing. Any other questions? Yes.
So Joseph and I went through that very painful experience of filing a patent and then finding out that because we presented at Arvo, it meant that it's
Yeah.
a thing. For a lot of young researchers, we also have to deal with short-term contracts. We have to be productive. So the fact that this is a long game, so we need to hold off on some publications. And one of these that we're trying to push for innovation that might have long-term benefits. But in the short term, we might not be able to show a lot of productivity enough to renew a contract. Is there a way in SNEC or somehow where they can show productivity of a person without like a...
Yeah, that's actually a very important question, because it sort of is, it goes against your KPIs, okay? Because being a researcher, you're expected to publish, right? If you don't get your publications, you may lose your job, or you don't get promoted, and all this sort of stuff happens, right? You train your PhD students and whatever. So SNEC now has got 2 tracks. So you've got the pure clinicians who don't really do much, but for researchers, if you, for example, have not published much, but you show that you are productive by building up your patent portfolio, that counts as productivity. So we recognize everything, and this is something that I have pushed from the very beginning, because I said, look, this is not fair. This person, just because they have not been seen to be productive, you're giving them a grade C, but they have actually filed a patent and it's now gone to PCT. I think that's an A star. And then I explained it, and they said, okay, and the board actually gave the person an A star for their performance, and eventually that technology was licensed. So, we have to recognize this, because you cannot punish people for doing the right thing when it comes to innovation, because they're going to stop. So, that's actually very, very important to make sure that individuals are rewarded accordingly. And I can tell you that about 10 years ago, even longer, there was another university, Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. The deputy provost took a very unconventional step. I mean, very traditional university, all were at that time. Unconventional step where he promoted someone from associate professor to full professor with an H index of 30. I mean, some of you already probably have an H index of 30 anyway, but this guy, and it was a huge scandal. Everyone was up in arms, other associate professors and other professors saying, this is outrageous. I, have got this, and how come this person's like a professor now like me, and, H index of 30. So the deputy provost was saying, I want to set an example. This guy has licensed 4 technologies and has brought in 25 million Singapore dollars on his inventions.
How many have you done? Your H index is 100. How many have you done? It's like quiet. So he realized that it isn't all about publications anymore. It's about return of the money that someone gives you. Is it something valuable? Return of investment to the taxpayers. Are you actually doing something useful to society with all the money that they give you? Is it actually paying forward? So, you know, this was unprecedented at the time. And now, everybody does it. So people get promoted now based on not just Nature papers, Cell, Science, H-index. They're scrapping that. They're now looking at productivity and outcomes. How many patients have you helped with clinical trials? How many patients have benefited with, like, with your technology? How many industry dollars have you brought back? So there is a gradual shift now. I don't know how long it's going to take, but maybe you'll think of this talk, this conversation that I've had with you in many years to come, that it will hopefully change in Hong Kong too. But in Europe, there are some universities already, when they look for hires of faculty in their universities, they don't even look at H index anymore. They look at what you've done with your career and how much productivity you have generated, how many PhD students, how many industry dollars, how many licenses or things like that now. So I think things are changing. I think it's for the better. I mean, it's also important to publish. I'm not saying that it's not good to publish, but there has to be a balance, because if you're an innovator, you can't do both. Because the metrics are day and night, all right? If you publish, then you can't file. If you file, you can't publish. So what do you want me to do? You know what I mean? So you can't be punished. You have to choose what you want to do, but the senior people need to understand that this is the track you're taking, and if you are hitting the metrics for that particular track, you should be equally rewarded.
I think again that needs to be really, we need to champion this idea to our senior management people, to make them aware about, I mean, obviously they know the importance of innovation, but they haven't probably done enough in terms of, for example, setting KPIs on not just publication and grants, but on patents, on licensing, incomes, things like that. That would make the whole environment change faster. I believe CHK is a little bit forward, a few more steps ahead than Hong Kong U. Hong Kong U still has perhaps a lot of kind of traction, a lot of cultural and traditional ideas that I don't know. I mean, it's not easy, but it's the way forward. So with that, we thank you, Professor Tina Wong, having such a wonderful, inspiring lecture with us this evening. So thank you.